Hi guys, my name is Aisha, and I'm going to be talking about 3 experiments that we did in the lab. However, I'm not going to be expounding on all 3 extensively, just basically 2 extensively and 1 as a background. So let's just jump right into it. So the first experiment that we did was on February 9th, 2023, and that was basically when we created our indigo pigment. And so basically we use this process of reduction, caused a reaction where we had some precipitate, and then we had like a liquid, and then we kind of had like a solidly liquid, and then we put it like in an ice bath, and then we kind of poured that distilled water and sodium hydroxide, I believe, and we put it through a vat dye, and it just soaked through and the air was sucked out, and we got left with pigment. And so that was our indigo pigment. The 16th of February 2023, we also conducted basically a trial run of paint, right? So we just had different dyes and pigments available to us, and we just picked out whichever one that we wanted to use, and we just kind of made a batch a stock paint almost. I wanted my paint to look and feel, I wanted my paint to look and feel a certain way, and to have a certain look, have a certain feel, have a certain application. And so I kind of just honed in from there what I was going to do with my procedure. And then on February 23rd, 2023, I decided to kind of perfect my trial that I did with my pigment that I chose on February 16th, 2023, and that pigment was methyl red, because that was the more out there and on the other spectrum of what the indigo paint was going to be for me to kind of compare and see what I wanted my paint to come out to be. 23rd experiment went pretty well, because that's when I used my indigo pigment to make my indigo paint. And so the goal of this multi-week experiment was just to create an indigo paint that was smooth in consistency, thick in color, and just like weight a little bit, and also just dries really quickly. So a background about paint is that paint is comprised of a binder, a pigment, and a humectant and a thinner. Gum arabica is the binder, and it kind of just gets mixed with the pigment, and it kind of binds it together, and that's like the base of what your paint is going to be. It looks like your paint, except it's gum arabica and pigment. Then you kind of add things to make it smooth, to make it coarse, however you want your paint to react, really, is what you add in. So my humectants were honey and glycerol. My humectants were honey and glycerol. So I did not want to use sugar. Sugar was an option, and I'll let the Aisha that was looking at everything at the time kind of explain what that was. I also used ethanol instead of water. I did not want my paint to take forever to dry, and I did not want the water to kind of dilute what the honey and glycerol was already doing to my paint. So that's why I swapped out the water for ethanol, and I did not perform a trial where I used water, and I probably wouldn't do that. So you can try it on your own, but I personally wouldn't have done that. Howdy. This is the materials I used. So gum arabica as the binder, honey and glycerol as the humectants, calcium carbonate to make the paint thicker and richer in color. We love calcium carbonate a lot in this experiment, as you will see. Alkanox to make the paint smoother, ethanol to thin out the paint a little bit so that it would dry quicker, and weighing boats, graduated cylinder, hot plate, stir rod, vacuum pump, beaker, balance, filter paper, fume hood, ring clamp, ring stand, scupula, utility clamp. That's all I used, and we had the pipette. Hey guys, yes, I'm using my phone as a microphone, but do you know what this coat and this picture have in common? Pigments! And my research project is basically about pigments, and I'll let editing Aisha get into that later. You have a lot of responsibility editing Aisha. Anyways, so I'm just gonna double in and talk about what I'm gonna do to check for my pigments, so that when I use other pigments, I can figure out what I want for my paint, and then that way, ooh, I know that was crispy. Okay, and then that way, when I make my indigo paint with the indigo pigment that I made, I know what to expect for my paint. So, oh my gosh, I don't know where my paper is. I will be right back. So I grabbed the paperwork and I'm going to be really, really quick because I do have to go make my pigments. But this is just like the check-in before I make my paint pigments. And then I'll check in with you guys a little bit later and just let you guys know like what I expected from this. Anyways, so basically there's various different things that you can mix your pigments with to make the paint the desired whatever, like consistency or whatever. Like it really just depends on like obviously what kind of paint you want to make. So I'm going to tell you guys what kind of paint I want to make, and I'm going to follow these procedures to make the kind of paint that I want to make. And then I'm going to test it out so that I know for trials 2, 3, and 4, I just like kind of perfected that, and then like I make the desired paint consistency that I want for my indigo. Okay, so number 1 is going to be gum arabica. That's a binder. We kind of need that to make the paint, but I do want to try honey as the humectant. I was thinking about sugar, but I think sugar is going to be a little like grainy, so I'm going to go for honey. And then I also want to use like glycerol, but I also need that to soften the paint. So I want my paint to be soft and smooth. And then so that would just also kind of so I'm going to probably use a lot more Alkanox. It makes the paint smooth. So what I want my paint to be is ultra smooth. I want that bad boy to be smooth, slick. Okay, I want Sharon Williams to be jealous of my paint. So we're gonna use a lot of Alkanox in it, and I want it to be like, I don't want it to be like thick, but I do want it to have like a nice deep color as what a pigment is going to react with these substances, so that I can make the proper paint ratios for my indigo paint. And maybe I'll be surprised. I don't know. Science. Okay. So a lot more honey, Alkanox. I don't want a lot of paint thinner. I kind of am going to use like a little bit of paint thinner. If I am, it's not going to be water because of the honey. But I am probably going to use ethanol and calcium carbonate to make my paint color thick. I'm not going to use a lot though. So yeah, okay, so those are my things. I want my paint to be smooth. I want it to be rich in color, and I kind of want it to just be like slick. So slick, smooth, rich in color. That's what we're trying to go for. We'll reflect later. Our procedure for the February 9th experiment, the indigo experiment where we created the pigment, I just want to highlight, because I worked in a group and I did not keep the paper for the procedure, I cannot read the procedure off to you. And so I'm just going to briefly explain from what I have, and I will let you guys watch the video of me and my group doing the procedure, so that way you can kind of understand what was going on. However, I did not really like call out what powders or liquids we were using, because we were just so focused on like trying to get the procedure done. But like I said, there is a great video that I have linked. I will send it to you if you need to watch how indigo is made, with more in-depth explanation. Rundown the indigo procedure. We use 2-nitrobenzylhide, acetone, and sodium hydroxide, and then we also had ethanol, diethyl ether, and distilled water. And so basically what that looked like is we took the 2-nitrobenzylhide and acetone, and we kind of like stirred it, and then we poured in sodium hydroxide little by little until it turned into this cloudy liquid, and then like stirred. And then after that we put something else, then we put it in an ice bath. And then so we put it in an ice bath, and we got like everything else set up. And then after we got everything else set up, we kind of like had filter paper, and we like put water on the filter paper, and then we like poured the indigo solution in, because at that point like it turned into indigo. And then so then basically after that, like, because it turned into like indigo, I was like, okay, slay. Then we poured in ethanol, diethyl ether, and distilled water, one after the other, let it filter through. At the top we had our indigo pigment, at the bottom we had all the liquids, and then so basically we let the vacuum run until everything was like soaked out of our indigo, so that was just purely powder and not any water left in it. And then so that's basically like the procedure for us creating that indigo. I hope that made sense. If it did not, our group here today, but we're gonna be making indigo. Oh, you guys are propped up on chemicals, by the way. Let's do this. It'll start to get like cloudy. Suck it up and start. There you go. This is the cool part. Just squirt it in. Don't be scared. You can squirt it fast here. This is what this looks like before we scrape it out. Okay. Procedure for the paint was different. So basically, I used 3 milliliters of gum arabica and I mixed it in very well with the pigment. And so the starting pigment for methyl red and indigo are highlighted immensely in the video of me actually doing the experiment. But I just mixed those quantities in, and then I used some honey and then a milliliter of glycerol, and I mixed those in very well. After that, I used about 2 scoops of sodium carbonate and I mixed that in very well, and then I used Alkanox, a couple granules, mixed that in very well, and then the last thing I used was ethanol to kind of seal the deal, mix that in very well. Once I was done with that, I put it in a smaller weighing boat where I then tested it out to see the streaks, see if I liked it, looked and monitored to see how fast it was thinning, to see and the door's closed. Alright. That's how much I have the methyl red pigment. I wasn't even recording. Gum arabica, glycerol, honey, ethanol, paint pigment, gum. No, that's calcium carbonate, and then this is alcohol nox. I think I'm gonna get maybe like 3 more. That's kind of a lot of pigment. Now we're gonna add this cute thing. Okay, I just added a glob. A glob. Okay. And a little bit more. So that amount. Half a milliliter of ethanol. Okay, so I'm using...
Wait, you know how there's like a little circle on top when you measure stuff? Mm-hmm. You're looking for the bottom of that circle.
Yeah. Alright, so this is our trial 1. We're gonna add a little bit of that. Alright. Blob. Honey. A blob of glycerol. Okay. Two of these of calcium carbonate again. And one like other. I mean, I yielded a lot more, but we're We're trying to see. Once again, literally at the meniscus. Literally at the pigment. So, oh, we were doing so well. 1, 2, 3. Milliliter of that glycerol. I think that's gonna suffice for. I'm gonna do a pinch. I'm gonna do this amount of calcium carbonate. Okay. Those are my. Okay, this one is a little bit more thicker, for sure, and it's a little bit more darker. But let's hope and pray that it dries a little bit more quicker. They're all going in there in order to try to. Bye. Hey guys, so this is our indigo that we extracted. Calcium carbonate over my mouth, ethanol, glycerol, honey, and
Yeah, it can be as like I used to say, she got like a video and it's like a Seinfeld. Like, and I had to figure out, for me, that's when my mind is like that. Yeah, I was at my house. It was gotta be interested in it. I loved it. It was a graduate class and I was undergraduate and I wanted the hard. But yeah, you guys have a specific disturb, right? And like, what was it?
Trial 1.
Of like,
Wow, it's beautiful and it's smooth. Look at that.
never studied in a group because, unless I was, yeah, I know what you're talking about. No, I know what you're talking about. So she have, but for me it was always I had to say, bring your questions. And when it becomes time, what is the topic? A set of the organic. Is the organic chemistry tutor for you?
2. You know, but this one's half a milliliter ethanol at the moment.
It's probably the first one, but the formula. I think like if you're feeling like. Does that make sense? So like it's a line. So try and plug the.
Okay, so this one dried a lot more faster. So I'm going to compare this with methyl red because methyl red took forever to dry in trial 2. As to this procedure was exactly what I did to methyl red in trial 1 and trial 2, and it's drying a lot more faster. Calcium carbonate.
Okay, yeah.
At the meniscus, okay? Trial. So this indigo color is beautiful, and I tried to do a time lapse, but it's already drying so quickly already. I don't know if you guys can see how quickly it's like drying, but it's pretty like opaque. Like it dries like pretty dark, as you can see here. It dries pretty dark, and so that's kind of what I wanted. And it's really smooth when I like. Okay guys, okay, so I finished my 3 trials as you just saw, and I just want to say a couple things. So as you just saw, we just finished our 3 trials. This is our conclusion piece. It has all of them together. I'm just gonna mix it like 3 times. And so this is our indigo paint. Okay. Alright, boom. It's staining my hands. It's a little liquidy, so I'd probably use like a 1/3, but this paint is actually really opaque, which is what I wanted. It's really smooth. I also wanted that, and it's drying quick, so I kind of like proved myself correct. So this is it. I'm gonna take that home, and then we're gonna leave editing Aisha to do the rest of the analysis. Hey guys, so this is the discussion. So there are gonna be about 3 main talking points, and my first talking point is trial 2 of methyl red. Now I recognize that there was an error afterwards, and this kind of dawned on me when I was doing trial 1 of indigo, and then I realized, OMG, I'm doing something wrong with methyl red. I looked back at the videos and then I realized, oh my goodness, I did something wrong. I'm so happy I had a 4th trial. Unfortunately, that 4th trial was not recorded. My phone died. My iPad died. Everything dead. So because of that, like, I did not, so at first, I'm going to tell you guys what happened. So at first, I applied the trial 2 methyl red paint, and I was like, okay, this is nice. Then I was like stirring in the gum arabica, and at that point it had been like a couple minutes, and I realized, OMG, why is my methyl red trial 2 not drying up the way that I wanted it to? It was like drying in like clumps. I When I was compared to like wall paint, like I was like, oh my goodness, like what's going on? And I thought it's because I didn't use any ethanol. But then I looked back at the video, and I had 3 shots of ethanol for methyl red. So I was like, okay, I had it aerial and I had it side view, and I was like, okay, so I had ethanol. So I kept looking at the video again, and then I realized I used a significantly amount, and when I mean significantly amount, more calcium carbonate than I did for methyl red. Like I did, and you'll see it in the video because I like playback, but I was so confused. I was like, I did not use enough ethanol for this calcium carbonate, so the ratios were just off. It was just not productive for both the calcium carbonate nor the ethanol to kind of work in the ways that they should. So I just feel like I just gave that reaction a disadvantage, and it just didn't perform the way that it should have. And because of that, I saw that the methyl red from trial 2 dried out. It was darker in color and it was thick, but it did not dry out in an appropriate amount of time, in my personal opinion. And it also was just very clumpy and not very smooth, and that just defeated the whole purpose of what I wanted. So from that error, I kind of adjusted, and trial 3 and 4 were better, and I had yielded better methyl red from that. So yeah. So for trial 1 of indigo, I realized this as well in the middle of me doing trial 2 for indigo. I know why it was so thin, because I didn't use half a milliliter of ethanol at the meniscus. So from trial 1 for indigo, I applied the paint and I was like, okay, it's smooth, it's nice, but it's a little thin, like too thin. Like obviously I want my paint to be like a lot, like a nice weight to it, and I realized that it was thin as soon as the brush kind of like hit it on the paper. Like I was like, okay, like it does not have like premium paint weight for me, and I was like kind of confused, and I like made note in my head, okay, like I need to pay attention to my steps this time, because maybe I can backtrack and see, okay, what did I do wrong and how can I fix it for the second trial. In the midst of the second trial, towards the end, I emphasized I don't know, something in my brain was just like 0.5 milliliters of ethanol, and that's when I was like, I need 0.5 milliliters of ethanol. I did not put that in trial 1. I put 1 whole milliliter of ethanol, and every single trial I only put 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. So to have 1 milliliter of ethanol kind of just like made my paint a lot more thinner. Because of my proportions of pigment from methyl red to ethanol being about 0.150 to 0.2 gram of pigment, I do believe that because with the gum arabica, like everything was just smaller, having the 0.5 milliliters of ethanol period would have having the 0.5 milliliters of ethanol would have given me the result that I wanted from the ethanol, which was to have it come out dry. Like I wanted it to dry. Like I want my, as soon as I put that coat down, I want it to dry because I wanted my paint to be buildable. Buildable things are prettier. So just a little too dry because I put it on the paper and then like a second later it was like whew. But then in trial 2, like I put on the paper and then like a little while after it like dried, but not too long. You know what I mean? It dried like in the perfect amount of time. I did not measure the amount of time that they dried because I was so focused on making my other batches. Because indigo and methyl red are two significantly different compounds. That means that they're going to react to everything that I put into them to make them a paint a little bit different. They are going to turn out as paint. I mean, essentially they're dyes. You know, they're all dyes, they're all pigments. And I feel like when I put in a little bit more calcium carbonate in the indigo, it came out a lot more darker. And indigo is a dark color. It just is. Look at your jeans. And I guess like I didn't want it as rich, but then again, rich in color, it dried so beautifully that I was just like, it doesn't even matter. When I put a little bit more calcium carbonate in my indigo, I did find that it did come out a little bit more darker than the other batches previously. And then I just do want to attribute that like the shapes of each molecule just work so differently with all the other shapes of all the other substances that I was using to kind of create this paint. And so they all just, it just came out the way that it wanted to, essentially. You know, it did come out the way that I wanted it to a certain extent, but it did not come out the way completely that I would have like wanted the paint to be. But again, I'm not a paint master, and the paint that I got, like I was completely okay with getting that paint. I was just like, you know, it is what it is. I did calculate my error percentage and it came out to about 28.5%, being that 2 of my 7 trials were not really successful in the sense that I messed up on my measurements in the grand scheme of things for that trial. In conclusion, there were 2 trials that went horrendously wrong. Being that it was careless measurement and just not really paying attention to what I was doing at that time. The tweaking came out perfectly fine. The paint came out the consistency, color, and feel at the end that was desired. When all the paints were mixed together in their vials, they came out the perfect consistency for both. They have amazing shelf life. They're still doing great right now. Final product that I wanted for my paints was achievable. And that is just because even though I messed up one trial, the majority of my trial was consistent. And it was just like that one thing that like threw it off. But mixing the paints together, as in like mixing all the trials together to achieve that one uniform paint that I really wanted, kind of gave me the paint that I desired at the end. So the final product of the paint both fell under the requirements I started with in the beginning, and both of the things that I wanted from my paints to begin with. So because that occurred, I don't believe that it was a fail, and I actually do think that my paints came out great. In conclusion, though I had 2 trials that went a little bit off, I can confidently say that the paint came out in the end with a great consistency, color, and feel that was expected of them. Coming from this procedure, I believe that I didn't really need to create any tweaks, and if I did need to create any tweaks, it was on my error and not for the procedure that was provided to me, because I didn't really add anything extra. I just kind of like followed the procedure but modified it slightly so that I could get what I wanted, and I did obtain those results that I wanted. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching this video. I know it's been like a crazy ride, but it was just so great just learning about colors and pigments and different reactions, and it was just a great thing overall. I really hope that you guys really enjoyed this video and you took out as much as I did from this. And if you have any questions, please feel free and ask Aisha in person, because this Aisha is signing out.
Yeah, so
Fit check.
you guys can get it like, usually like, I think the other half of the class is usually like 10 minutes late.
Start the indigo. These gloves are like, you know, like the water birds, right? You know what I'm talking about. Just TikTok videos. I'm gonna find one and Instagram that.
It's like a water bird, where they like have the nurses with the big. This is what this glove feels like, except it's not that. Anyways.
All right. Oopsies. A dimethyl ether. Diethyl method. We don't know.